Hi there. I wanted to introduce you to one of our trusted partners today. We're going to be talking a little bit about probate, elder law, some of these things that we're finding come up frequently with our clients, and a lot of times we get questions about that, and we wanted to go to the expert because we're not attorneys. So I wanted to introduce you to Steve Helseth. He's an expert in elder law and probate, and he's with Hoffer law firm in Anoka. So he's generously offered to answer a few questions on our behalf and bring you up to speed on some things that maybe you should investigate further if you're finding this in your situation now. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Wanted to ask you, people talk about probate all the time. What exactly is probate?
Yeah, so probate's just the process for transferring assets from you to your family upon your death. It's the court process for doing that,
Okay.
but it tends to be fairly expensive. So it's an expensive process, it's a time-consuming process, and it's a public process.
Okay.
So if there are family members or people that want to complain or have their voices heard, it gives them an opportunity to complain.
So it's messy.
It's messy.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. Way to summarize it.
Okay.
It's messy.
So if you have a will, does that eliminate the need for probate, or?
So a will does not help keep things out of probate in any way.
Okay.
And I think that's probably the biggest misconception that I hear talking to people is they say, well, I've got a will, so I'm good, right? And no, with a will, you will go through probate if you're relying on your will.
And so what's a good way to avoid that, or are there better ways to handle transferring that property after someone passes?
Yes, I mean, specifically with real estate, usually a transfer on death deed or a revocable living trust is a much better way to plan for what happens to your property and also keep everything out of probate as part of that process.
Okay. And how difficult is that? I mean, I hear people say that they'll just take care of it themselves. And how do you feel about that?
Yeah, well, I'm not a big fan of do-it-yourself
Okay.
when it comes to estate planning. Part of my job is cleaning up mistakes that people make when they do it themselves. So usually I recommend working with an attorney when it comes to something like a transfer on death deed or especially a trust, making sure that it's done properly and making sure that it's the right thing for your situation, right? Because anyone can get a form, anyone can fill out a form, but a transfer on death deed might not be right for you,
Okay.
and it's the attorney that's going to help you figure that out.
Okay. So that's what I'm hearing you say, is that everybody's situation is different, even if it's slightly different, and there might be a better solution. Probably, I'm assuming, a less costly solution in the end in some situations. Would I be accurate?
Yeah, I mean, usually if we're cleaning up a mess that someone else makes, it's, 3 to 4 times as expensive as just doing it right in the first place.
Okay.
And not to mention all the hassle for the family and the messiness that you talked about earlier.
Right. Absolutely. And probate takes a long time, doesn't it? I mean, is it a long process?
I mean, typically 9 to 18 months to go through probate.
Okay.
So it's not quick.
And during that time, you're not able to sell the property or do anything with it. Is that correct? Like, until that's complete?
Yeah, I mean, so the whole probate process takes 9 to 18 months.
Okay.
Usually it takes 4 to 6 months to get to a point that you can sell real estate as part of it.
Okay. That's a long time.
Right. So the families are waiting, trying to pay bills, trying to pay the mortgage as you're waiting for the probate process to get started.
Okay. That's good advice. Would you mind if we touched on a couple of other things too that I hear from people, which is with regard to their real estate, their home they've lived in, if they're concerned about going into extended care and what happens. And I hear people say things like, I'm worried that the state is going to take my house if I can't afford my care. Is that a valid concern? Yeah,
I mean, it's typically not the state taking your house, but if you're in an assisted living facility where it's costing, $8,000 to $10,000 a month to pay for your care, the state's going to make you sell your house to pay for your care in most situations.
Okay, so you'd be forced to do that.
Right.
Okay. And then what about, I also hear people say, well, maybe I'll put my son or my daughter on my property so that that can't happen. Is that actually a way to avoid that, or?
The general answer is no,
Okay.
that it's not a good idea to add a child to your property. For one, when you add a child to the property, you're giving up control over that property.
Okay.
So, outside of a long-term care context, your child could force you to sell the house. You might not be able to sell if your child doesn't want to sell.
Okay.
When you add a child to the deed, you're giving up control over the property. And there are also a lot of creditor issues, tax issues, liability issues that come along with that as well. So I usually tell people joint ownership is evil unless it's with your spouse.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is you need to be thinking through that process, right? Of whether it's a good idea for your particular situation.
So what I'm hearing, you can tell me if I'm collecting this information correctly, is that each of these situations may sound similar, but for me it may be different than someone else, and we really need to have that diagnosed in order to know what's the right way to proceed.
Yes.
To protect.
Yep. And that's why the attorney speak is to say generally most of the time, because every situation is unique, and it's not until we can look at your situation, your real estate, your finances, your goals, that we can figure out what the best option is for you. And it's even more so the case with elder law planning, medical assistance, long-term care planning. The details are everything in that world.
Okay. Good information. That's a lot to take in. I appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us. And if you have further questions, feel free to reach out to Steve. We're going to put his information at the end of the video. And we appreciate any of your comments, any of your inquiries. Thanks so much.